Here the question involves the importance of not hesitating when the thought arises, the thought of giving. It's a wonderful thing to do that. The act of the doing of the mental deed, that's what I'm referring to. The thought arising, manifesting in your heart, in your mind, to give. It's a life-enhancing experience. I remember when I was teaching biology years ago, and to my students, and someone asked about, one of the students asked that human beings are the only ones who can give selflessly. Is that true? And I paused for a second and I said, well, we are known to have that quality, but bees have that too sometimes. They've seen this in bees. What I'm referring to is altruism, sacrificing oneself, or because when a bee colony or a hive is attacked by a wasp or something, another animal or a predator, the honeybees will attack, knowing full well, knowing, quotation marks, it's a natural thing in them where one or more of the members of that bee colony will attack, knowing that they would be also sacrificing their lives because the stinger is attached to their gut. And if they cannot intimidate by buzzing around the predator, where they really have to go and, try to harm with their stinger, they run the risk of not coming back. And it's a horrible death for them. Because once it enters the predator's body, it's assuming that it can. So basically altruism is also seen in some animals, such as bees. But it doesn't occur that usually or generally. But we, as human beings, have that special quality to want to expand ourselves into selfless actions, to selfless deeds. When you look at the Buddha's life, you see it all about being all about generosity. One thing that I really found myself be so taken by in the events that took place in the Buddha's life and his students, and the things that he would do, such as walk for hundreds of miles. They didn't have airplanes, they didn't have trains, and India did not have the convenience of roads, proper roads that covered all those miles, the different stretches of the Indian subcontinent. But you see so many places, so many instances where the Buddha walks. He would scan the world to see who would be most benefited that day from him being around on this planet. And that itself, we should pause for a moment and look at he didn't have to live. We don't consider this. The Buddha did not have to live. He was done with the work. He became the Buddha after all. But he wanted to stay. He wanted to live. Why though? To give. He didn't need to eat this, sometimes the sumptuous food that came to him, the attention from kings. He didn't need any of that. Especially the majority of the time where he had to go walking from door to door, from village to village, to obtain the meager morsels of food. He was already a king's son, let's not forget. He was the crown prince at one point. He was going to be the king of a region in India. He already had given that up. So that already is giving. So generosity comes from our drive that follows a thought. So the thought itself, even though it's wonderful, it's great that we have that inner diamond that takes place, that shows up in the mind, the wish. But what can happen, and nowadays does happen quite often, is the thought arises, but it dies there too. So it never manifests it doesn't materialize in any way. Why? Because it's like a clogged artery. And the blood is trying to go through it. What is the clogging being used as a reference for? All that plaque, all that gunk that's in the artery that's not allowing the blood to flow. What is that? Well, it's a series of should I not? Does this person deserve it, or they don't? Well, I don't agree with what this person is doing, saying, behaving, da-da-da-da-da. Or, well, I think they'll survive without my support. Let's imagine you're somewhere in Savatthi 2,600 years ago and you see this tall Bhikkhu come up to you. Graceful, quiet, looking down, walking so mindfully, barefoot. Every step is so mindfully executed. And when he turns around, it's like an elephant turning around. Does not speak, does not giggle, does not laugh, does not chat with other people, does not say, hello, how are you over there? None of that. He's just... And behind him, there is his attendant. Or in some cases, a group of bhikkhus lined up. Each one beautifully spaced out. As if somebody took a measuring tape and measured them, the distance. And it's perfectly equal between one and the other. Gradually receding into the horizon. But other times he would be walking alone and he came right in front of your doorstep. He didn't knock, he just stood there. And you look at your own body, you look at your own feet. You feel your tummy. Maybe you're hungry. Maybe you yourself had a rough night. Maybe you had an argument with your wife or your father or your sister or something. Seeing such a person, a recluse, a monk, a bhikkhu, the mind would go through so many different calculations. Should I not? Should I not? Those things have always happened in people, that hesitation, which is what it's really doing is delaying a state of grace to permeate in your life, in your heart, at that moment, because we're always presuming, every time we think that we have a lot of time, any thought, not just thought about giving, but any thought you have, we're always presuming that I will have enough time to execute that, to do that, to get involved with that, to think more about that, etc. Whatever the thought may be. I'll have enough time to go and meditate. I'll have enough time to go and take care of that. I'll go and help those people over there when, in 2 months' time. But not now, basically. That's what it means. Delay is that, not now. Procrastination is, I support that, but let's give it some time. As if we are in charge of the time we have. We're not. In the Dhammapada, Lord Buddha says, when you have the thought of giving or being generous, do it. Don't hesitate. We have examples of this in the discourses of individuals who hesitated and they missed a great opportunity because death was waiting over there. Or imagine you're about to give to that bhikkhu. And you look at your bowl of rice, you look at your own, pot where you were cooking your curry or this and that. We're still 2,600 years ago, just that visual. And you look over and you see 3 children you have, and a wife, and your mother, and your dogs outside. And you say, well, was this going to be enough? Now, the calculating person will sit there and say, well, I'm sorry, close the door. We don't usually consider that so many doors closed when they saw the Buddha approach. I once was in Southeast Asia, and about 13, 15 years ago, something like that. And I was living in this village, in this Buddhist country, with a Buddhist family, locals. And suddenly the matriarch came by and she said, in their language, but I could see from the gesturing, I was staying there as a guest, by the way. Shh, 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 shh. You're basically quiet. I said, why? What's going on? And she said, they're coming. I said, who's coming, basically? The daughter translated. And I look out the window and I see monks come by. And she didn't open the door. I was quite surprised that was the case. Perhaps I had ended up being or spending the time with a family that didn't have much faith in the sasana or in the bhikkhus. I don't know those bhikkhus. I didn't know them then. I don't know them now. But so basically, if there's a backstory there, I don't know. I didn't ask. But the gesture, which was surprising to me. You don't have to empty your closets, your cabinets, to give and give and give when someone comes in need of your help. You can give something. You could give a mango, for example. Okay? And that's what people do often. When you read the story of Ajahn Mun, for example, he would be walking through the countryside in Laos or Thailand in those days. And people would give whatever they had. Sometimes people would try to give raw fish because they were fishermen or they were living close to the rivers or they had just caught fish, some fish, and he would like, we don't have the utensils to cook them. Sorry, we don't do that. So, but people would give things. Like I've seen when I was at other times in Asia, I've seen people come and give tiny little probiotic packs, tiny little bottles, plastic bottles of probiotic. Other times they would give you bags of chips, so many chemicals in them, but they didn't know, they didn't, think about that. But they were sharing something with me, something that they would give, that they had. If I would not accept them, they were, or if I was not in the picture, they would be giving it to their child, to their loved ones. They would be consuming them maybe. But they were opening up their potentials, because that's what it is, you're giving. Now, the Buddha kept walking for 45 years, going from place to place to teach, to help. When he surveyed in the morning and to look with compassion as to who might benefit the most. And he would see the person and he would go there and they would just need a little bit of tweaking. Sometimes they would be that person who shut the door on the Buddha's face. By the way, you have examples of that in the Sutta Nipata and other places. But then the outcome of that, suddenly the person, after hearing the words of the Buddha, were shocked into reality. They didn't miss an opportunity. Some of them quickly became bhikkhus. They just went forth. They were so shocked. That's another form of generosity, where you're being generous to yourself. Because you're not taking in, for granted the fact that you're present here. So that hesitation in the mind is a cause for delay, which the Buddha teaches us not to. When you have that desire occur in you, do not prolong it by dwelling on it. Should I not, should I not? Because the ship's going to sail and you're going to be left here without that. I can recall from my years as, when I used to live in different metropolitan areas in the world, I would, especially as a teenager, I would see somebody, a beggar, or someone who needs money or asking for money. I would pass them by and my mind would kick in. Well, that person was doing this, or they were smoking over there earlier, or they were doing this, or it's like, should I give them, should I not? Well, if I give them the money, they're going to go ahead and do that. What if, am I promoting drug use or substance use? What if he doesn't to buy money? Or one time I even remember, now I just recalled, I actually stood there in front of a person and said, if I give you this, where are you going to spend it? I actually said that. I'm like, wow, now I recall. Are you going to spend it for food? Or are you going to spend it on alcohol or drugs? Such conceit in me, looking at this man. So I'm giving him, I'm patronizing him with my so-called act of generosity. So there's like a commitment, like almost, where's the paper? I need to decide, I need to have a signature here that says, when I give you this measly $10 or $10 or $1, you're going to go ahead and do it this way, huh? So you see, it's even aggressive. It's self-centered, it's patronizing, It's condescending. Has nothing to do with generosity. What needs to happen is heeding the advice given by the Buddha. If you hesitate, time will pass. And remember, to be good students of the Buddha, we have to reflect those qualities of giving, of generosity. What I mean by that is you cannot be someone's student, a true teacher's student, who gives while you yourself hold back, live with closed-fisted attitude. One has to be open-handed. The Buddha is the perfect example of a giver. He never held back. At one point he opened both hands and he says, I have not kept anything back. I did not teach with one hand behind my back. The greatest thing that we can give is the Dhamma, when we have it in our hearts. But to give the monks who are worthy, who live the holy life, truly, how that monk lives embodies and becomes a living lineage holder of the Dhamma. That is enough. So when the thought arises, please don't have any political, almost business-like transactions going on in your mind like I did those years ago. To say, well, if I'm going to give you this, you need to have this, or you need to be doing this, or you need to be saying this, you need to be behaving like this, da 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 da. That defeats the whole purpose. You can't have such dynamics happen in you and still keep the blood flowing. In that, using that simile I gave about the clogged artery, because no blood. That's why there's a heart attack, because life stopped. You will stop. There's a dana aneurysm that goes on in you. It dies. Later on, go ahead and talk about your generosity to yourself and say, well, it's so wonderful, I had the thought of giving. I think about giving all the time, okay, and the other thing is maintaining safety in your mind. What I mean by that is maintaining the inner sense of insurance policy. Sometimes people give to score some points in some heavenly realm. That's also another misuse of the desire to give. Misunderstand, and countless so-called religious people throughout different cultures, different religions, different sects have used this, still use this in the world, all parts of the world. I've seen, where there is abusing the trust and love of those who are the givers by teaching them wrong beliefs, by teaching them, by implanting in their minds wrong understanding of what the dana or the giving is all about. It's not a business transaction. When Anathapindika gave his entire wealth, pretty much, to build the monastery in Savatthi, he didn't say, well, if I'm building this monastery for the Buddha, the one I took as my teacher, as well as to the monks and this and that, so it's going to be a huge community, because he emptied his whole treasury. He was the top business, it wasn't just a philanthropic good deed type of a thing so that it could get published in Newsweek or CNN could report it, BBC could report it, and he feels good and people interview him. None of that. He felt he had to. Lord Buddha never asked him to, but he saw a need because there was no place for the Buddha to stay whenever he passed through Savatthi. He had the joy arise. And generosity has everything to do with joy. So long as that intention of being generous is being highlighted in your mind. That is the non-clogged artery where the blood is flowing beautifully. And the more you do that, the more the clogging is going to be released and kicked out. And you're going to be alive. You're going to be really joyful. Because the very first of the teachings we receive has to do with dana. Unfortunately, we live in a time period where that generosity is in the world. Because of the culture we have, because of materialism, this and that, and questioning everything, attitude, where we overstep, just like I overstepped that day as a young kid looking at this person who's asking me for whatever way I can help. And I had to, almost like using my finger, index finger, shaking it in front of him. Are you going to do this? Are you going to do this if I give you this? It's ugly. You give. You're not calculating. Because it's like holding onto a rope that is attached to 1,000 ton weight at the edge of a cliff, and you're trying to not let it drop. Every time you're holding on to that thought, should I not, you're holding on with bare hands to that 1,000-ton weight. Imagine what that does to your hands, or even if it's 100 kilos. It burns. That's why it kills. When the blood cannot move through the arteries, it gives you a brain aneurysm, stroke, and you're dead. So a thought of generosity that is not passing through you beautifully, where you don't question, using your logic, using your whatever, yes, sure, rational thinking. But there's a Bhikkhu in front of you. The Buddha is standing in front of you. If it need be, the person would have said, I'll give my children food, even my dogs, but I can eat half of what I'm eating today, from my share. And I would give half of my share from that bowl of rice, for example. And he would scoop up, and place it in Lord Buddha's bowl. There's so many examples of individuals who even gave a cup of water, a flower, a wilted flower, to a Pacceka Buddha. And that completely changed their trajectory in life. And in samsara, yes, to give to such a noble person especially brings such incredible benefits that cannot be measured, Lord Buddha says again and again in the Anguttara Nikaya. So many people have deprived themselves of great opportunities because in their minds they think they know what a noble person is and what is not. And they look at another person, they say, aha, see all the shininess and all that, and who's helping them, this and that, and how much support they're getting. So I'm going to go and support such a temple, such a big, loud, influential, and ignore that other person who's a nobody. Well, how do you know the noble heart? Do you have those qualities? As the Buddha says, as Venerable Mahamoggallana says, do you have the ability to see heart to heart? Can you read the mind? Can you read the inside? underpinnings or the workings of this person versus that? Can you telepathically know what they're thinking? No? Then what are you going by? What are you judging? So this again comes back to the selfish intentions of the giver, potential giver. All the calculations, this and that, which we have a lot of these days in the world. And that's why many people, when they do come back, even as humans, will really struggle, because there's a lot of selfish, tight-gripped, close-fisted sort of attitude in their living, where it's all about me, what I can have, what I can have, what I can gather, what I can have. And if I'm giving, I better have all those reporters there being notified that I gave this to this. There needs to be a plaque. Never did it say when Savathi's monastery, Anathapindika's in Jedas Park was built, that there was a plaque written, donated by Anathapindika the householder and his family. Nowhere. But that's what we do today. Somehow we want to have something there that says the person's identifying marks, initials, something, to feel good. That's not. In fact, it should even be erased from your mind, the fact that you've given. At the most, which is actually something that's recommended by the Buddha, the joys that arise. You need to have at least 3 phases of joy that takes place when you're giving. 1, when you have that initial thought of giving. You don't procrastinate, you don't prolong it, you don't delay. You're itching to do it, the act. Okay? When you are terribly hungry and you think about this place that you're going to go and eat, or you're invited somewhere to go and eat, and you know the food is delicious, you're itching to go and sit in front of that plate and devouring it, right? Because you're hungry for 3-4 days, let's say, haven't eaten. That same drive has to be there when you have the thought of giving. Otherwise, you're clogging up your system. You're holding on to the rope, 1,000 tons pulling you. You're resisting it by pulling back the opposite direction. So the thought is wonderful, but it's nothing when it's just a thought. It's a wish. It's nothing. But the one who really gives has already given, started the process in their mind. And that gives them a tremendous sense of joy while they haven't yet given. So it's pre-giving. Second level of joy, by the way, it's a crescendo. It's growing, the intensity of joy, the exhilaration that one feels in the heart and the mind. The second phase, you might have guessed, has to do with the actual giving of that. It might even be a statement. It might even be saying, I forgive you, to someone. Someone that you're holding back from saying it because you know what that means to them. They've hurt you, they've done this. That's another form of generosity, by the way. But once you hit that send button, or you text them back, or you call them back, or you see them and you say, or you're facing each other and you say, you know, that thing that you're concerned about, whether I would ever forgive you, I have. I cut it off. It's gone. Please don't worry about that anymore. I release you. That's also generosity. So when the person is giving, they're seeing the physical manifestation of the thought they had. So you're giving birth to a beautiful thought. And you're seeing what that is doing to the person who's receiving it. So mind is no longer involved. The more you involve the mind in the thinking of doing something good, the more cobwebs you're going to create the more labyrinths you're going to create for yourself, the more clogging you're going to create for you to pass through. You become stagnant otherwise. So, initial thought of doing it, just focus on that. Here would be the practical steps involved, right? And it must give you joy. Don't dwell on any other things. Well, if I give him that portion of rice, he's going to go, I'm not going to walk from door to door. So there's a big chance, this is how the economist, capitalist, or not the capitalist necessarily, but the greedy Scrooge in us, Ebenezer Scrooge from Dickens, that character, he would think like, well, he's going to get, even if I give him a grain of rice, there's 250 houses here in this village. 250 grains of rice, that's a decent meal. But I'm not sure I'm going to eat that much. So I'll give him a grain. Or let me give him 2 grains. That's how many people think these days. Where if he goes and picks up 2 grains from every household, he's already, he has a big bowl of food. That is unhealthy, that is stingy, that is living with your fists closed. Opposite to the one who's open-fisted, open-handed in giving, just like Lord Buddha was. We forget that he was royalty. We forget that Venerable Sariputta was royalty with the wealth that he came from, the family, Brahmin family. Same goes with Venerable Mahamoggallana. Same goes with Ananda. Same goes with Anuruddha. And a slew of other monks. These people used to eat the best food. They used to live and sleep on the best of, bedding and this and that. They had the best that living a human life could give. Everybody would drool over these things. They walked away from that to find Dhamma. They did, and they kept sharing it. And that is why it's highest, because it's temporary. When we die out of this life, the next time we come back, if we come back as humans in the next birth, it will be very, very, there will be a very faint possibility that we might be at the time where there is still Dhamma left of the Buddha. This is not just coming from me. All the signs are there. I just did another translation of Sutta, actually Theravada verses of Venerable Pussa. It's highlighting all the things that we see around us. And he's calling it the end of days of the sasana, the end of the days. And you look around, that's what's happening. We are living in those time periods. So the more good things you do, you already have experienced the joy of the thought arising of generosity. Now you're giving it, that's the second higher level of joy you experience. And then comes the third. The third is when the action is done, you walk away from it. And as you're walking away, as if you're climbing up on clouds, as if you have wings, as they say, you have goose flesh all over you. Happen. It's blissful. It's really blissful. Take the examples if you've ever fallen in love, or you've ever been told, I love you, by your parents, by your loved ones, or someone hugged you. A friend said, don't worry, I got your back. And you were at the end of your rope. You had nothing left, or felt dreadful. But until you heard that, what does that do to you? Multiply that by 1,000,000. Okay? That's how it feels when you recall the eyes of that person to whom you gave the gift, looking back at you with moist eyes. And this person was not related to you, by the way. You didn't have any specific like contracts or something like that. That's why it has to be pure. The thought, the action, the deed. Every time you recall that, suddenly it just, wow. You've given yourself a tremendous gift, because that's the highest joy that you would get out of that thought of giving, that specific deed you did. In hindsight, you look, wow. So many people have even been saved at the moment of death because they recalled one time they did something good. And for that, we always recommend, even if a person has lived, like as I said, Ebenezer Scrooge type of life, as bhikkhus, we encourage a person at the moment of death, and obviously when we're interacting, when we're teaching, please remember the 5 precepts. Think about, can you recall any moment in your life where you've given something to someone selflessly? You're not going to die like the bee does, okay? When you give. But when you're giving, make sure you're giving away your ego, as if you're dropping it. That's what I mean. You're letting go of that plaque inside the artery, instead of having like strings attached. If I give you this, then you'll be doing this for me. Or you're going to change those things. It's like a child almost. That cheapens the whole thing terribly. If I give you, Bhante, this, if you expect my support, then you must behave like this. You must do it this way. You must say these things, or you must not say those things. Who are you talking to, really? A child? Ever heard of positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement? Basic 101, Psychology 101. But that's what you have in the world. At least even if you don't verbalize it, you're thinking about it. Just like I did over there, that person sitting there, and I'm like telling him, if I do this, what are you going to do with it? Well, it's none of your business. In fact, don't even give it to me, the man might think. If you have the thought, execute it and release yourself, because it has a lot to do with holding on, craving, upadana, holding on, grabbing. The craving, which is tanha, says, no, I worked hard for this grain of rice. So a lot can happen. Dhamma could be taught to you, by you, if you're observing it very carefully, what you're doing in your mind. All these calculations. That's why we have to heed the Buddha's advice by not delaying, because we're not sure when I might get another chance. Because given back, that example of that person, the homeless beggar I had seen years ago, I mentioned. Well, actually, it wasn't that one, a particular incident, but other times where I gave back and forth in my head, well, should I not, should I not? I have the cash in my pocket. And then, I think I was around 17, I'm not sure, but I walked around the corner and I left. I decided not to, because my justification in my head, my reasoning did not, it didn't do the math, basically. It didn't come out in support of the person. So he lost in my head, the person, the thought of giving, it didn't go through. Sorry, I'm not going to give you, because you have this or you have that, in my head, it's not justifying me giving you this. So I turn the corner, and then meanwhile, there's a lot of calculation happening, and sense of guilt, this and that. Like, who are you? Who are you to think like this? Suddenly, I said, I don't care. I have to go back. I have to give. I walked all the way back, like 5-10 minutes back, and I couldn't find them. The person had gone. And with him, the opportunity. Maybe he really needed. Not everyone is trying to scam us, although there's a lot of scammers. A lot. But the scammers are not going to come in the shape that you think they will. Dhamma will recognize, just like that student, if they're true students, they have to reflect the generosity of the teacher that doesn't hold back, that gives and gives and gives and gives and gives. So you cannot call yourself a student of a teacher. When it comes to you, you have justifying reasons, quote unquote, not to be a giving person. Because if we are lineage holders of the Buddha, it cannot skip, it cannot stop, it cannot have a gap. That generosity, that Dhamma flowing, even. You cannot even hold on to the Dhamma. There are people who do that, of course. But we're not interested in them. We're not interested in that activity because the Dhamma is nobody's, is for everyone at the same time. You cannot own the Dhamma, the truth. It's for everyone. So, when you have access to it, you give it. You give it. Just like the breath. People think that they have their own breath. No, we're breathing each other's breath all the time. We're transferring the microbiome information constantly. We don't even think about that. So let's do that with the Dhamma. Let's do that with our generosity, without holding, without putting a boundary, without putting a, border onto that act of generosity. Leaving no debate in your mind. So you don't walk away having not done the generous act and then think about it and then come back and not find that person again. There. Do it, as Lord Buddha says, without thinking twice. If you have that feeling, when it rises in you, don't hesitate. Because you might not even have the life left after that step. You might drop dead and when you turn the corner. That has to be the thinking process. But make sure when and before you're giving, you have the joy. That's the litmus test. And the only way you do that is obviously by the thought having it and giving it, but also shutting down those recesses of your mind that wants to take it to court, mental court, where you have a prosecutor, this and that, and defend. No. That's going to be, Anathapindika didn't have that. Sukhyota.